A boy's best friend is his mother. Hey, hey, Wolfpack, we're back with another surprise tier list. This time we're returning to a familiar franchise. Wait a tick. Kat, didn't you do this before? Yes, I have, but this time we're ranking the Psycho Saga again on a tier list. Yeah, I decided to do another one since I had time this weekend. Going to be doing a much shorter one because Lost Galaxy ended up being much longer than expected. I will not apologize, I love Power Rangers, but this time we're returning to the realm of horror, once again re-exploring the Norman Bates saga, the Psycho movies. And one TV show. Yeah, one snuck in here. I got every entry of the Psycho Saga, and I will be ranking them all from top best to bottom worst. Yes, we have every Psycho movie, from the Alfred Hitchcock masterpiece, all the way to the TV show that some people have forgotten about, Bates Motel. Now, I'll be going over the rules if this is your first tier list ever. I'll be talking about each and every one of the Norman Bates stories or the Psycho Saga and ranking them from who's top best to bottom worst. Keeping it simple this time, I have letter grades, just so it's easy to follow since I'm not sure how many Psycho fans I have in my subscribers. Up top we have S tier. These ones are the masterpieces, the best of the best, the perfect 10 out of 10s, the epic entries of this saga. And honestly, we might be seeing a lot more up here because Norman Bates' franchise was actually pretty good. There are some low moments which we'll get to, but overall I would say they're definitely good, and the best of the best will be up here in S tier. Then underneath that in A tier, these ones are the golden ones. They're good, not great. Might have a criticism here and there. Might not be the greatest movies of all time, but definitely a good entry. A 8 or 9 out of 10. It's a very serviceable story. I like it. Has a lot of great moments. Definitely worth watching, and I do recommend it. Missing that extra push to be a perfect 10, but I would definitely say they are an A tier entry. Making sure my mic works. Sorry to keep annoying you with that. Alright, next we have B tier. These ones are okay. They're Silver Skulls. They're passable. Definitely a fun entry. A lot of good, but an equal amount of bad. Might be a very mixed movie. Okay, it's average. It's adequate. It's serviceable entertainment. Has a lot going for it, but also has a lot more negativity. Some criticisms. Some stuff that makes you scratch your head or go WTF. But they fall right smack in the middle on B tier. It is an average. Then underneath that, we have C tier. These ones are below average, need much more improvement. Definitely, I would say Bronze Skull territory. They have a lot of interesting ideas. Could have been something great, but wasn't quite fully well developed. Not fleshed out enough, not polished. Definitely a weaker entry in this saga. This one is basically forgettable. Then we have D tier. These ones are duds, plain bad. Very weak movie, not all that good. Not the worst thing ever, but also not the best thing ever. They are a total dud, barely above F. And speaking of which, F tier, these ones are total failures. 0 out of 10s, the worst of the worst. Not at all a good entry in this saga. They are rock bottom bad. And I think you know exactly what's going to end up down here. Alright, making sure my mic works. I do have my phone to keep up with the live chat with you guys. Okay, good. Everything's working. Okay, so if you don't know, the Psycho Saga is an old school horror saga going all the way back to the 1960s with Alfred Hitchcock's masterpiece. Psycho was actually originally based on a book, and like a lot of Hollywood adaptations, they ended up throwing the book story away mostly to turn it into its own thing. The Psycho movie is a masterpiece. I do really like it. It is one of Alfred Hitchcock's best works, one of my favorite horror movies of all time. Hence why we're doing this tier list here. So, Psycho ended up being a huge hit. However, it was not supposed to become a franchise, but Hollywood's gonna be Hollywood, so they tried to turn Norman Bates into a bigwig horror icon. Now, Norman Bates is awesome. He is iconic. He is a very compelling, deep, and tragic character. Norman Bates is not your typical slasher killer. He's not like Freddy or Jason. He is a deeply, deeply unwell, psychotic man. He is very troubled, plagued by trauma from his abusive childhood, namely that of his mother. His mom, Norma Bates, was a horribly abusive witch who ended up improperly raising her son. Norman grew up very unstable and became the titular psycho. He was so insane that he became a serial killer, starting with his mother, at least depending on the continuity you're following, where Norman would become a slasher believing his mom was the killer even after she was long dead. Yeah, spoilers, I did warn you in the title. There are going to be huge spoilers, especially if you have not seen any of these other entries beyond Psycho 1. Norman Bates became kind of a slasher killer. People stop at the Bates Motel, he has his creepy mansion up on a hill, his mom's always watching him, always influencing him, and pretty much is inside his mind 24/7. Norman loses it, snaps, becomes his mother in his psychotic mind, kills people while dressed as her, and basically believes that his mom is the actual killer. He is a deranged serial killer. However, Norman actually is very complex. He has a lot more personality, a lot more charm to him, a lot of backstory, and Norman is actually a very sympathetic character. He doesn't want to be evil, but he finds himself becoming evil because of his mother's influence and his deranged mindset. Norman is actually a rare tragic villain, a tragic monster, and over the course of the series they would flesh him out, explore his backstory, give him redemption arcs, have him fall back to his old ways, and so on. He goes around killing people. Norman is also sexually confused because of his mom's horrible, horrible influence over him. Mother pretty much beat her son severely, traumatized him, and made him extremely messed up. Norman can't decide whether he loves or hates his mother, not because of the abuse he suffered, and basically each passing film kind of dove into the character more. Some interesting, some not so interesting, and we're gonna be ranking them all. So, Psycho did have a few sequels. We have Psycho 2, 3, 4, The Bates Motel, the first TV movie, then Bates Motel, the successful series, and of course the infamous Gus Van Sant remake. And I'll be ranking them all. Not sure how many Psycho fans I have in my audience, but I figured why not do this because, hey, let's end the month of February on one of the most disturbing love stories of all time. Yeah, I thought it would be pretty funny. Okay, making sure everything's working. Okay, not too many people are here yet, so I guess we could take our time with this. So, Psycho is a saga I actually do love. I would recommend a few of these films. Skip the remake, that is easily the worst on this list, but we'll go over that soon enough. Psycho honestly is a pretty fun franchise. It's very interesting, very deep, and actually explores their slasher killer in a very interesting lens. You can't decide whether or not you feel sorry for Norman or if he's too far gone. He's too unstable, too dangerous, and we've gotten quite a few interesting stories that tackle this character. But let's finally begin this tier list, starting with, what else? Psycho 1, Alfred Hitchcock's masterpiece, which, yep, it sucks. Nah, of course, I'm kidding around. This one's going on S tier because of course it is. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho is a masterpiece. It is great. It is an epic. This movie is one of the greatest classic cinema masterpieces of all time. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho is very much what I consider his best movie. It is creepy, it is unsettling, it's actually pretty deep, has a lot of thrills, and it has Alfred Hitchcock's greatest villain, Norman Bates. It should. Hey, Firewolf the Woolgan, glad to see you. Okay, so if you don't know, Alfred Hitchcock is a huge name in the horror community. This guy made a ton of interesting black and white films. He has made several in color films, I do know that. He's made a lot of interesting tales, a lot of noir style stories, a lot of psychological thrillers, and this one is easily one of his peak movies, easily in my top 5 favorite Hitchcock masterpieces. Alfred Hitchcock actually hilariously had the biggest troll trailer out for this movie. He didn't reveal too much about it and basically teased the audience, like talking about his movie and hyping it up, but never revealing too much. You had to go see the movie to see what this was about. Alfred Hitchcock would like show up at times saying, and this is where Norman committed his most unspeakable act. But you don't want to see any of that. Yeah, that was kind of his trailer for this. And Lo and behold, this movie ended up being one of the greatest hits of horror for all time. People really loved it, found it scary. Of course, the shower scene is from this movie. Yeah, you know the scene where the woman goes to the Bates Motel, takes a shower, completely exposed, and the killer breaks into her shower, stabbing her multiple times to death. This scene scared an entire generation. It made cinematic history, not just one of the greatest horror movie scenes, one of the greatest death scenes ever made. It was that good. And a lot of cameos. Yeah, Hitchcock would make plenty of cameos. He's always makes a cameo in every one of his films. Sometimes he's a background character, sometimes he's very prominent, like interacting with the character. But yeah, Hitchcock, definitely a fun director. Lots of parodies and references. Yeah, definitely. Psycho 1 is pretty much the legendary masterpiece, and to this day, it still holds up well. No, I did not see this movie when I was a kid, and I'm not that old. I saw it when I was in university studying film. We were studying like psychological horrors, and for the first time ever, I saw Psycho, and I fell in love with it. This movie is very dramatic, very intense, always has this uneasy atmosphere, and honestly does have a few shocking twists and turns. Even though the shower scene has become more famous than the Darth Vader twist at this point, there are still some very insanely creepy scenes here, namely Anthony Perkins' performance as Norman Bates. Okay, so explaining this movie will be very short because the first hour is a big fake out. Yeah, this is one of the big reasons why the movie was huge. For a whole hour, we follow a decoy protagonist. Marion Crane, who you see on the poster here, she's set up as the main character, then Hitchcock kills her halfway through. The shower scene was also very infamous because, yeah, our main character ends up dead, and Norman Bates becomes our villain protagonist. He's kind of the central focus for the second half of the movie, revealing that this guy is actually the worst villain of the two main characters. Yeah, if you don't know, Marion Crane is set up like she's important. She ends up robbing from her own bank. A bigwig donor comes in, gives like a huge money settlement to go to his account, but Marion ends up stealing it so she could run away with her fiance to live happily ever after. This also has Sam Loomis, not Michael Myers' psychologist. Believe it or not, a John Carpenter homaged Dr. Loomis after Sam Loomis from this movie. Sam Loomis is the straight-laced badass boyfriend character. Loomis loses contact with his girlfriend. She runs to the Bates Motel and then ends up murdered here. She interacts with Norman Bates, and Norman and Marion are shown to be like parallels to each other. They kind of have similar stories, but we get the very subtle hints that there's something off about this guy. Norman is seemingly nice on the surface, but there are clues and red flags here that suggest there's something more going on, that he's not quite well. Namely, Norman keeps talking about his mother. He hates her, but he can't leave her. He sees some good in her, even though she clearly doesn't show good to him. Norman is kind of caught in his own trap, and Marion kind of tragically realizes the error of her ways here and decides that, oh, maybe I should head back, because she was inspired by this boy, seeing that she was honestly in the same trap as he was, forever haunted by a dark mistake. And then she ends up murdered and Norman becomes the killer. Marion's sister becomes the actual de facto hero of the story. Lila Crane and Sam Loomis work together, fall in love, and try to uncover what's going on here. They think Norman is up to something. A detective goes in, and this death still is pretty scary because Detective Arbogast kind of investigates. They set him up like he's gonna be a big hero too, only for him to end up stabbed and thrown down the stairs. Yeah, I know, this scene looks kind of goofy now. I get what Hitchcock was going for. He's like falling and tumbling to his death, but it does look pretty hokey and silly. Still kind of a shocking jump scare, though. Hey, Captain Clanton. Lots of parodies and references. In the book, Norman's appearance was too on the nose. He was described to be older and scarier looking. Yeah, so they changed how Norman Bates looks compared to the book. In the book, he kind of looked like Homer Simpson. The author, Robert Bloch, kind of aimed for a more Ed Gein looking guy. He was overweight, he was balding, he was this creepy old dude who still lived with his mom. Implied to be kind of like trailer trash type of characters. Honestly, reading it, he kind of reminded me of Homer Simpson. Yeah, Norman Bates looked like Homer Simpson. Anthony Perkins was casted because Hitchcock thought it would be scarier because he wouldn't suspect him of being a killer. And I think this was a very great change, especially because Anthony Perkins looks much nicer, much younger, very clean, kind of dorky. He's a nice young man. Someone very unsuspecting and unassuming because he's so effeminate, very kind hearted, and friendly on the surface. Perkins pretty much knocks his performance out of the park, going from this nice, innocent, shy guy to this very creepy, cold sociopath on the flip of a dime. Of course, this film introduced the concept of the false protagonist. Yep, it did. Technically, the book did that, but Hitchcock was the one who kind of popularized it. Yeah, Marion dies. Lila and Sam Loomis try to crack the mystery. A detective guy is also set up like he's gonna be the hero. He ends up killed. Honestly, a pretty shocking death. We pretty much get clues that Norman and his mom are up to no good, though you kind of hold out hope that there's good in Norman, that, oh, he might be just an unwitting pawn to his mother, forcefully protecting her, but no, we find out in the twist, Lila and Sam Loomis go to the Bates Motel to investigate, set up a trap for Norman, find out that Marion Crane was here, get a super unsettling scene of Lila breaking into the Bates mansion. Norman's house is honestly creepier than the hotel itself. The mansion is always like looming over the hotel, always watching Norman get those creepy scenes of mother sitting at the window, always looking down upon her son, and the room itself is very, very disturbing. Like, I heard in film class that apparently Hitchcock aimed for making it like the mindscape. There's the ego, the super ego, and the id, and each room kind of hints towards that. The living room looks kind of normal, but then you go upstairs and you see Norman's mother has this nice queen-sized room. It looks very clean, very well, and you see the mom just lays in bed all day because she has an impression there. Norman's room, in contrast, is very creepy. Looks kind of like a children's baby room. There's like a lot of clouds painted everywhere, a lot of toys, a lot of scraps of paper. Norman likes to draw and make art, kind of suggesting that Norman hasn't grown up, which is a very unsettling clue to how unwell he is. Marion like opens up a scrapbook and closes it out of fear. They don't show you what's in the scrapbook, but if you read the book, apparently it's a bunch of makeshift porn. Like, Norman cuts a bunch of pictures of women, including like naked women, and like copies and pastes them all together in this book. Kind of glad they didn't show that because your mind makes it much scarier. But yeah, eventually she finds out that Norman's mom may be the killer, the one who killed her sister. She makes her way to the creepy basement and we get the big twist. Norma Bates is dead. Yep, all this buildup, all these hints, and Norma Bates is this gross, decayed, skeletal corpse that her son has been tending and caring ever since the day she died. It is also a very creepy scene. I really love this moment. We get her spinning around and you see the creepy, disfigured skeleton looking like it's smiling evilly at her. Then Norman rushes in, dressed as Mother, pretty much telling you that, yeah, it's all a psychotic delusion. Fortunately, Sam Loomis ambushes Norman, saves the day, and we get that long drawn-out scene of the psychologist explaining the plot. Yeah, Norman pretty much is exposed, is taken down. We find out the hard truth that he is the killer. He is the one behind all the evil happening at the Bates Motel, and ultimately killed the sister because he believed it's what his mother would do. The mom was so controlling that she pretty much possesses Norman even long after her death. Norman thinks he's his mom, dresses up as her to fulfill the illusion, and kills numerous women because Norman is attracted to them. Yeah, Mom is a crazy-ass yandere psycho. Yep, Norman killed Marion because he was attracted to her, but it was really what he thinks is his mom. Skinner, what's that, Mother? No, Mother, that sailor suit doesn't fit anymore. That was a Simpsons reference with Skinner. Yeah, I remember that. Another thing the film is remembered is the shower scene with the blood drain in the shower. We later changed to the eyeball. Yeah, that transition still holds up really well. Who wants to come to Neverland? Apparently Norman does. Norman pretty much loses himself. This would be completely retconned in the following sequel. But yeah, Norman is now his mom fully, and we get that creepy shot of him smiling towards the camera that "you're next." And pretty much end on them finding Marion Crane's car. It was dumped in like a swamp behind the motel. This was pretty much how Norman got away with killing people, and would actually get away with it in Bates Motel also. Yeah, Norman apparently dumps the bodies and all their vehicles and stuff inside this swamp, a bunch of quicksand and such. Bates Motel kind of made the swamp look a lot bigger, but here the movie does a fine job because it's so unassuming. But yeah, Psycho 1, it's a masterpiece. I do really like it. It holds up very well. It is creepy. It is thrilling, and Norman Bates is a very compelling character, especially because you actually do feel sorry for the killer at a few points. The murder mystery is still pretty good. Even when you know Norman is the bad guy, there's a lot of clues and a lot of setup revealing that Norman was always evil to begin with, that Norman was unwell, and that Norman and Marion are more alike than we think, which honestly makes the fake-out hour feel more worthwhile because Marion and Norman are kind of mirrors to each other, but Marion ended up ultimately dying because of her mistakes, whereas Norman tried to hide behind it, only became a much worse person until he was taken down. They see I wouldn't swat that fly. Yeah, I remember South Park also made fun of that scene. Yeah, this movie still holds up, still pretty cool, still very unsettling. All the performances are very great, especially Anthony Perkins, though Janet Leigh is also a pretty hot fake-out victim. Sam Loomis is pretty cool. Lila Crane would become much more interesting in the sequel, but here she's fine. She's serviceable as our final girl hero. A lot of creepy scenes, especially around the Bates mansion itself. I do think the mansion is much creepier than the motel, even though the motel is the iconic set piece. But Psycho pretty much holds up. It is still great. Highly recommend it, and easily number 1 on this list. It is going on S tier. Alright, now we're flying into more obscure territory, starting with Psycho 2. So, after the success of the Hitchcock movie, we wouldn't see a sequel until 20 years later on its anniversary. Yeah, even back then, Hollywood was doing these long sequel gap movies. This one came out in the 80s, where Norman Bates is finally released from the asylum. Norman has paid his debt to society and has been declared legally sane. Norman went to prison, got help, and is seemingly sane until his past starts to haunt him once more. And Psycho 2, also going on to S tier. Yeah, this movie is pretty great, underrated. Some would argue that Psycho 2 is better than the first movie. I'm not one of those people, but I do agree it is a phenomenal sequel. I am shocked at how good this follow-up is. This movie, believe it or not, did not do well upon its initial release. A lot of people saw it as, well, what else? A cash grab, a desperate attempt to milk the popularity of a once big horror hit, but honestly, this ended up being another great entry in this saga. Psycho 2 follows Norman Bates, and this time he's the main character, the full main character. We don't have a fake-out protagonist this time. Norman Bates is released from prison. However, the world is unsure whether or not they want to accept him or fear him. A lot of people treat Norman like he's still a criminal. A lot of people suspect he's still psychotic. He might snap one day, go back to his old ways. However, there are some people willing to hear him out, hear his story, forgive him, and give him a chance. Anthony Perkins is back in the saddle, and Lila Crane, now Lila Loomis, returns. Yep, Lila from the first movie is the only other character who comes back. Lila is one of the main villains of this movie. Lila is rightfully pissed because she does not forgive Norman for what he did, is still upset and traumatized from the loss of her sister, and wants to see Norman locked away for the rest of his life. Lila kind of harasses Norman, blames him for all the bad things happening. However, we find out she's kind of become the villain in her own right. Lila has her daughter Mary, yeah, that's it, Mary Loomis, go undercover and play a honey trap femme fatale to seduce Norman and trigger his psychotic mind once more. Mary Loomis, pretty underrated, sexy final girl. I really like Mary Loomis. Yeah, she's hot, she's kind-hearted, she's noble, and actually is a morally gray character. Mary Loomis befriends Norman, seemingly acts as a friend towards him, but is helping her mom kind of gaslight Norman. Norman goes back home, believes he sees his mom, sees several hints and clues telling him to return to murder, is constantly triggered by his past. Meanwhile, there's a lot of suspicious characters coming around, a lot more kills in this movie. A lot of people like go into the Bates Motel, look into it, a couple goes in to of course have sex only to get killed. A lot of suspicious characters. There's this fat douchebag who was the manager of the Bates Motel, hates Norman Bates, then he ends up killed after he of course tried to start a fight with him. And we also have Norman's therapist, I believe Robert Loggia, yeah, the guy from the Family Guy cutaway, Robert Loggia. Robert Loggia plays Norman's psychologist in this one, tries to help Norman get back on his feet. The psychologist is kind of his handler, helping Norman maintain his grip on reality, helping him readjust to normal society again. This one, kind of a slow burn story at first, but once again, really creepy moments. They try to tease that somebody is back to killing people at the Bates Motel again, and halfway through we find out it's not Norman. It is somebody else. It is a big murder mystery plot. There's a copycat mother infiltrating the Bates Motel and killing a lot of people who annoy Norman Bates, a lot of people who hate him, a lot of suspicious characters, a lot of red herrings, and that sort. Kind of a murder mystery story. Mary Loomis befriends Norman, and this movie achieves the impossible. They make you feel sympathy for Norman Bates. Norman Bates is actually the most tragic character in this movie. Norman wants to go back to living a normal life, wants to forget his evil mother, forget his villainous past, wants to end his slasher reign of terror and start anew. Norman wants a clean slate, he returns home, but obviously some stuff is getting to him. He keeps seeing Mother, Lila is trying to gaslight him, Mary is helping at first, but Mary undergoes some character development, grows to love Norman, cares for him, possibly is a love interest towards him. Yeah, Mary kind of falls in love with Norman. They get a heartwarming moment where she comforts and tends to him when he's having an episode. Norman is walking a very thin line of good and evil. Some characters are dying on the sidelines. Robert Loggia is trying to investigate what's going on here. Finds out that it's Lila, and basically everything goes insane in the climax. A lot of the plot threads come together. Norman starts snapping, starts believing that Mother is back, that Mother never left him, is having an episode. A lot of characters don't know who to trust. Mary accidentally kills Robert Loggia. She dresses up like Norman's mother to try and guide him back to the light, only to assume that he is indeed a killer because Lila Loomis ends up dead. Yeah, one of the controversial moments of the movie. Lila Loomis, the hero of the first movie, does end up dead in this movie, which, yeah, I can see some people hating because it felt like she deserved her happy ending in the first film. But no, Lila became an evil villain, broke into the Bates Motel, and she ends up killed in a honestly surprising and brutal twist, revealing that she is not the copycat mother killer. She had her own villain scheme, but ends up killed by a worse person. Mother seemingly kills Lila. Mary finds her mother's body, believes it's Norman, only for the police to show up at the wrong time and assume Mary is the real killer, where Mary is gunned down. They try to keep it vague if Mary died or not. They say she was shot, but we never see her return in the sequels. I suspect they were planning to bring her back if the character was popular enough, but nah, she ends up dying. Mary is gunned down. Norman is revealed to actually be innocent all along. People believe Lila Loomis was the killer, until we get to our twist ending. I felt sympathy for Norma in that one. I do too. I felt sympathy for Norman, honestly, in the first movie too, but honestly, his villainy did outweigh his tragedy. Psycho 2, the tragedy outweighs the villainy. We get our twist ending. Norman is finally liberated. He's proven to be a good man. He returns home, but we meet the real villain, Emma Spool. Who? Okay, Emma Spool was like this background character who showed up throughout most of the movie, and it turns out Emma is Norman's real mother. This would be completely retconned in the next movie, but Emma was actually Norman's mom. Really, Norman Bates' long-lost sister. She wanted to take Norman for herself, and she was the one protecting Norman like a mother would protect her son. She wants to be with Norman, and Norman finally murders his mother. He smacks Emma Spool in the head with the shovel, and it is one of the darkest yet most hilarious scenes. Emma Spool gets completely betrayed and killed by Norman, and he goes back to his old ways. Yep, downer ending. Norman snaps, becomes a killer again, and Emma Spool got her wish, but in a be careful what you wish for type of dark twist. She is finally Norman's mother as a corpse. Emma's turned into the corpse mother and held in the bedroom again, where Norman fantasizes her talking to him again, causing the movie to start where it all began when Psycho 1, Norman becoming a killer once more. Downer ending, but a pretty epic and tragic twist. Yeah, Psycho 2 is awesome. I really love it. Really intense mystery. Really interesting characters. Mary Loomis, underrated final girl. Really like her. Lila Loomis did get some interesting character development. I know some people hate Lila dying, especially her brutal death. She gets like scissors through the mouth. Pretty brutal scene. And Norman honestly undergoes some really radical character development. I like Norman Bates in this one and how they kind of shine a light on how Norman is not like Freddy or Jason or Michael Myers or even Ghostface. Norman wants to be the good guy but ends up becoming the evil slasher killer, which honestly makes him very compelling and very unique compared to all the other horror icons we see. I guess she's not popular enough, XD. Yeah, too bad. Mary Loomis was pretty cool, also pretty hot. Yeah, what's her name? Meg Tilly, honestly is a pretty beautiful woman. Really like Mary Loomis. She was the best character, at least the best new character. Norman Bates, of course, was the MVP. But yeah, Psycho 2, honestly, a really great movie. I absolutely recommend watching this one. It is just as good as Psycho 1. It does not outdo Psycho 1 in my eyes, but yeah, it is an S-tier movie. It is a masterpiece. It is still pretty good. Psycho 2 is definitely worth the watch, and actually a rare good sequel gap sequel. Yeah, Psycho 2, S-tier. Alright, next we get to Psycho 3. Yes, they made a third one. Anthony Perkins directs this one, and honestly, this one is kind of a mixed bag. Psycho 3 is a really, really crazy sequel. Anthony Perkins, who plays Norman Bates himself, actually started his directorial debut with this movie, doing a follow-up to the very underrated Psycho 2. This is basically Psycho, but from the perspective of Norman and Mother. We're watching basically the events of the Bates Motel play out, but from the villain's perspective. Norman is back to his evil ways, but is actually tested with a redemption arc. So, Psycho 3 has a bigger ensemble cast compared to 2, and some characters are good and some not so good. Emma Spool is now the new mother, and I will give credit, her creepy decayed design is really cool and gross looking. They brought the corpse mother back, and yeah, she does look pretty gnarly. Unfortunately, they do retcon the twist that Emma Spool is Norman's mother. No, she is not. She is just a crazy woman who tried to take Norman away from her sister. Yeah, Norman had 2 psychotic parentals in his life. We do meet some unique side characters. Dwayne Duke, played by that guy from Lost. Dwayne Duke is honestly a pretty funny villain. He's very smug, very arrogant, but also kind of crude, kind of unhinged. Dwayne Duke is a character who could have been very interesting had they go the route they originally planned, but ended up kind of like your basic bitch a-hole character. He does have his funny moments, does have his moments of levity, kind of shines as kind of this smug, arrogant jerk who thinks he's better than everyone, only to quickly learn the hard way that he's not. Though I also like the new final girl in this movie, Maureen Coyle. Maureen Coyle is a kind of a clone of Marion Crane. Maureen Coyle looks like Janet Leigh, has the same initials as her character, and is also a broken bird, a lost woman who lost her way and ends up at the Bates Motel, only to have her life changed by Norman. So, I do like Maureen. Maureen is very cute, very lovable, very quirky as a character. Maureen is also a tragic victim. She is a former nun who underwent a crisis of faith. She lost faith in God, is suicidal, and when she attempts to kill herself, she accidentally killed one of her sister nuns. She pushed the superior nun off a bell tower and she fell to her death. Yes, this is an elaborate reference to Vertigo. Yeah, she accidentally killed one of the nuns, she fell off a bell tower, and she went into self-exile, blaming herself for her death, where Maureen wanders the desert lost and alone until she ends up at the Bates Motel. Dwayne Duke tries to rape her at one point, almost takes advantage of her. She ends up kicked out of his car. She walks all the way to the Bates Motel, and Norman saves her, gives her medical treatment, almost contemplates killing her until he sees her tragic story, sees that she reminds him of Marion Crane, almost kills her in the shower again, but then sees she tried killing herself by slitting her wrists, bringing Norman back to reality. Norman saves her life and actually has a very touching and interesting romance with her. Norman and Maureen have a very cute and loving romance, kind of giving them hope in this hopeless desert. I will warn you, Psycho 3 is kind of an art house film too. There's a lot of bizarre shots, a lot of trippy visuals, and the soundtrack is very good. Psycho 3's music is excellent. Highly recommend listening to the soundtrack if you don't like the movie. The songs are very 80s, but there's like this really cool Mask of the Phantasm choir chanting every time Norman becomes the killer, becomes Mother, every time he's tempted to kill, and of course a lot of good 80s music. Maureen in the Desert is one of my favorite soundtracks. Norman ends up saving Maureen. They have a nice, touching romance. However, once again, somebody is killing people at the Bates Motel, and we're led to believe it's Norman because he's still the villain at this point. Norman is, once again, walking the line between good and evil. His romance with Maureen brings out the good in him, and Norman is actually debating if he should continue killing people, or if he should let go of his slasher job, basically. Yeah, Norman doesn't want to kill people anymore, is actually happy with this girl. However, Mother is influencing him still, and this one really plays up the mom's influence. He believes he's seeing Mother's ghost. He sometimes hears her talking to him when he's not imitating her. Mother is still really creepy. Really love this shot of the mom's corpse, like just standing in the window still, and Norman and Maureen actually see her, giving the impression that she might be moving on her own. Yet Mother is treated like she's a supernatural monster in this one, which I do really, really like. Yeah, the mom is extra creepy in this movie. If you didn't find her scary in movie 1 or 2, here, the mom and her corpse are all over the place. Norman is constantly talking to her, constantly seeing her move even though she's not really moving, seeing her doing stuff that she probably couldn't be doing without Norman being there, which is very haunting. So, a lot of crazy semantics happen. There's also this reporter chick. She's more so a footnote in the movie. This reporter is trying to study the several murders that happen here in Psycho 2, believes Norman is evil. She's kind of also a clone of Lila Loomis. Lila was also following Norman, trying to expose him. Reporter chick is also suspecting Norman is back to his old ways. The sheriff from Psycho 2 is still here, being a nice guy, reasonable with Norman. However, everything falls apart come the final act. Mother's body mysteriously disappears. The reporter almost exposes Norman, but finds no evidence, no corpses, as if somebody moved it. And we find out it was Dwayne Duke all along. Yeah, Dwayne Duke, the douche character, actually took Mother's corpse and covered up the evidence because he wanted to blackmail Norman into working with him as criminal partners. Now, there is a deleted backstory in a few scenes that would have explained this character much better than what we got in the film, and I really wish they kept this in the actual movie. Dwayne Duke originally was supposed to be, I kid you not, a psychotic fanboy of Norman Bates. Dwayne Duke, he sets himself up like he's this wandering nomad, this musician who's trying to find his big break, working odd jobs until he makes it to, Hollywood, California and whatnot. But it turns out in the alternate cut, Dwayne Duke is actually a Norman Bates fanboy, and he was actually coming here to seek out Norman to become his apprentice. He idolizes Norman Bates as his serial killer hero, and willingly chose to work at the Bates Motel to be closer to his hero and be a great killer like him. He took Mother's corpse because he wanted to protect Norman and have his back. wanting to be exactly like Norman and carry on the legacy of the Bates Motel killings. And I really, really wish they kept this story in the film because it would explain so much and actually would have been a very powerful twist. Yeah, Dwayne Duke pretty much is set up like a bad guy. He does a lot of bad things. He almost rapes Maureen. He is very violent. He uses women, cuts up a lot of pictures of like Playboy models into his creepy serial killer scrapbook, is a huge mood swinger, exactly like Norman, going from nice and charming one second to very hostile and angry the next. He does feel like he was trying to go for Norman Bates, how he was like in the first movie. And it would have been so cool if Dwayne Duke was actually a wannabe Norman Bates fan. That would have been such a very unique and interesting twist. Unfortunately, they kind of downplay it. Parts of the story are there, but he more so wants to blackmail Norman Bates. And Norman does end up killing him in blind rage, like ironically beats him to death with his own guitar. Yeah, his catchphrase all movie was "don't touch the guitar," and Norman touches the guitar and pretty much kills him with it. Honestly kind of funny, though it gets kind of weird because he hallucinates Mom laughing at him while Woody Woodpecker is on. Yeah, this movie is really weird. But yeah, Dwayne Duke ends up killed by Norman, and I kind of wish, again, that they kept the fanboy angle in this because it was supposed to symbolize Norman killing his past self. Norman was supposed to see his evil self in Dwayne Duke. This was the entire point of making him a fanboy. Parts of this are still here in the movie, but yeah, Dwayne is everything wrong about Norman. He's psychotic, he's selfish, he also is crazy, hears voices in his head, and sees nothing wrong with his behavior, justifying it through his own insane logic. And Norman killing him was supposed to be him kind of symbolically killing the evil, that Norman realizes he doesn't want to be the bad guy. He wants to be good. They unfortunately kind of change a lot around this scene, but yeah, Dwayne gets beaten to death hilariously, and he tries to dump Dwayne Duke's body in the swamp. Unfortunately, in a very surprisingly good jump scare, Dwayne Duke is still alive, and he jumps him while tied in the body bag, causing them to crash, where Norman finally kills Dwayne for good, drowning him. Honestly, the most satisfying death in the movie. Really cool. Dwayne is like drowning and they're fighting in the car while it's flooding. Norman manages to escape barely, completely broken, completely haunted by what he'd just done, returns to the hotel. Maureen undergoes kind of this arc where she realizes she does love Norman. She finds out who he is and actually forgives him, wants to help save him because Norman helped save her. Unfortunately, the ghost of Mother intervenes, and just when Norman and Maureen are about to embrace each other, Norman is startled and Maureen falls down the stairs where, I kid you not, she's impaled on a statue of Cupid's arrow. Yes, that is an actual death scene in the movie. She literally gets killed by their love. Cupid's arrow ends up stabbing Maureen and she falls over dead. Norman blames Mother, but Mother keeps fighting for control over him once more. Without Maureen, Norman goes back to his old ways, and the reporter lady ends up being the hero. I really wish it was Maureen. It would have been so much more satisfying. But no, reporter lady comes in, reveals the big twist. Emma Spool is not Norman's real mother. She was her crazy sister who tried to abduct her sis's kid. Yeah, again, really crazy movie. Norman is pretty cool and creepy in this scene. We see him dressed up as Mother, and for the first time it's in color. And Anthony Perkins is really good at some crazy faces. He's imitating Mother's voice, has a lot of jump scare, scary faces like from The Haunting Hour, almost kills reporter lady, but then finally snaps and stands up to his mother, realizing that Emma Spool lied to him, where he stabs and beheads Emma Spool's corpse. Norman finally gets rid of his mom. Unfortunately, he is arrested at the end of the movie, but once again, leaving the door open for a sequel. Norman's arrested. The sheriff says he's gonna lock him away, and we see Norman is holding Mother's severed hand on his person, hinting that he's not redeemed just yet. Yeah, setting up one final film. Psycho 3 honestly isn't that bad, but also not as masterful as the first two. I will actually put it onto A, though, because I did end up liking it a lot. Someone deleted their comment. Okay, so Psycho 3 honestly isn't too bad. Honestly, I would recommend checking this movie out. I would call it not really a horror movie, but a beautiful tragedy. There's a lot of good scary scenes, a lot of cool artsy, trippy moments, and the music, especially in this movie, is epic. Psycho 3, I will argue, has the greatest soundtrack of this entire saga. Really love those quirky and disturbing orchestra choir music. It is very good. Though, I will say it is also very depressing. There is a lot of heavy emotional moments in this movie, but I think it was pretty good because it makes you feel for Norman and Maureen Coyle. I do wish Anthony Perkins stuck to his guns in some decisions, but honestly what we got wasn't too bad. Perkins said he was ashamed of the movie, but I don't think it's the worst film ever. In fact, I would argue it does have a lot of good moments. Psycho 3 is definitely a very decent in-between chapter of the saga, and heightens why we find Norman so tragic. Norman, I trusted you. Yeah, that was very sad. Yeah, Norman ends up arrested. He goes back to prison, only to be let out once again in Psycho 4, so not that depressing, honestly, in hindsight. But yeah, I do like this movie. I think it's pretty decent. Could use some improvement here and there, but I will still argue it is a golden movie in this saga. Going on to A tier. Speaking of which, we're on the finale of the Anthony Perkins saga, at least. Psycho 4, The Beginning. Alright, just getting some water, because I gotta stay hydrated here, since it's like the Bates Motel desert. Okay, Psycho 4, The Beginning is a prequel slash finale movie to the original Norman Bates saga. This was, I believe, Anthony Perkins' last film until he unfortunately died. I believe he had cancer, and he wanted to make a few passion projects before it would consume him. One of them being ending the Norman Bates saga, with Psycho 4, The Beginning. Norman Bates is once again out of prison. Some people consider it unrealistic, but honestly, knowing this takes place in California, I believe it. Norman Bates is finally out of prison and once again recovered from his mental illness. He seemingly gotten his life back on track until one day where he receives some shocking news. His wife is pregnant and he's going to be a father. Norman Bates is going to have a child. He unfortunately did not end up with Mary or Maureen, who I preferred. He ended up with a nurse who treated him back in the mental institution. Norman's wife is pregnant. However, Norman is very terrified and reflecting on his own childhood. Norman does not believe he's going to be a good parent and looks back upon his past, remembering his own parents, where we get Norman Bates' origin. Yep, in the finale, we finally get to see Norma Bates when she was alive, played by Olivia Hussey. Yeah, Olivia Hussey is Norma Bates. We finally get to see her alive and well, and follow Norma's origin as well. We see when Norma used to be a loving, caring mother, Norman idolized his mom until Dad died. After Dad was out of the picture, a lot of Norma's negative traits and ugly habits started to slowly rise until she became a psychopath, and they show us pretty much everything. We see everything. Norman Bates as a child, Norman Bates as a teenager, as a young adult, all the way up to his current age where he's Anthony Perkins. We see the mom was the worst. The mom was an unstable, selfish brat. Mom pretty much lashed out at Norman every time she got angry. She was lonely, very sexually starved, low-key molested Norman. She was definitely into her son, and every time her son seemed to reciprocate, she would project a lot of her anger onto him, saying, "Oh, Norman, that's bad," even though she was clearly instigating it. Norma would dress up her son like a girl, psychologically break him, treat him like he was a woman to be abused, and obviously, this led to him becoming a monster in the future. I feel like the movie would have been stronger if Norman died in the end, heroically. Talk about Psycho 3 or 4. I do think 3 would have been interesting, but 4, honestly, I wasn't too shooken up about it. Norma was pretty much the worst mom ever. I do like Olivia Hussey. I know everybody loves Vera Farmiga from Bates Motel, but Olivia Hussey honestly didn't do that bad a job, especially because this was Norma as the way we pictured her based on all the interactions and flashbacks of the last three films. Husey actually kind of knocks it out of the park, going from a caring, loving mother looking angelic to being a complete psychotic freak, treating Norman badly, kind of projecting a lot of her issues onto him, which is what paved the way for Norman into believing that he was his mother, because, yeah, Mom constantly treated Norman like he was nothing, mistreated him, kept him away from women, always abused him, locked him in closets, made him dress up like a girl. Definitely stuff that would destroy your child's brain. However, Mom pretty much moved on, and they do kind of retcon the story of her lover. Norma goes out with this douchebag, I kid you not, this like weird jock bully guy named Chet. Chet like comes in and he's also kind of a dickhead toward Norman. Yeah, who would have thought? They both love to abuse Norman together. She dates like this man-child guy who tries to teach Norman to man up, but just like uses it as an excuse to beat him. Norman is like beaten and can't take it anymore, and finally get to the happiest moment of the film. Norman poisons his mom and her lover. He actually like sneaks in like rat poison into their breakfast. They both eat it, and they turn it into kind of an action scene where Chet and Norma try to kill him with their last breath. They like go down trying to fight him. They're falling down the stairs. Norman finally gets to satisfyingly punch out and beat up the abusers. Chet like gets a brutal death, being beaten, stabbed, and Norma finally dies. The last thing she ever sees is her son looming over her, kind of like how she used to loom over him. Yeah, it's honestly pretty satisfying, not gonna lie, definitely worth the build-up. But yeah, Norma died. Then we see chronicles of how Norman became a killer, how he tried to move on, tried to get away from Mom only to come back to her, how he tried to date women, that girls were actually interested in him, but he didn't know how to handle it because of his unstable mind, ended up killing most of them, drowning them in the swamp, basically all your origin stuff, and honestly, it's not too bad. I know it was kind of unnecessary and, you know, points out some obvious plot threads that we probably saw coming, but it wasn't that bad. And ultimately, this leads to modern day, where Norman fears that he's going to snap and he's going to kill his family, believes that his child will just be another psychotic serial killer just like him, that he's unworthy of love, unworthy of a happy ending, where Norman lures his wife to the Bates Motel. He finally confronts his bad childhood, almost kills his wife, but his wife brings out the good in him, telling Norman that he is worthy, he is a good person, he finally can let go of his mother, and Norman burns down the Bates Motel. Yep, the Bates Mansion and the iconic motel completely destroyed. Norman confronts his past, kind of Silent Hill style, sees Ghost Mom, sees all the characters from his past, trying to guilt him into committing suicide with him, but no. Happy ending. Norman destroys the Bates Motel, is ecstatic that he's finally let go of his past, overcomes his trauma, and makes amends with his wife, that he's going to finally become a good person and be a good dad, and thanks to his wife, he finally has the confidence he desperately needed, that Norman finally gains a happy ending and will not be like his psychotic mother, and Happy's post-credit scene where Mother's ghost is finally sealed away forever. Honestly, I didn't think the movie was that bad. I thought it was actually pretty entertaining and much more satisfying than the Bates Motel show's finale. John Smith is here. Alright, sorry, catch up on comments. The ghost face reveal is a bit out of nowhere, but Scream 7 is fine. Really, it's getting a bit overhated. It's not like he's going to jail for arson. Well, it was an abandoned building, and one a lot of people probably wanted to burn down anyway. But honestly, I don't think Psycho 4 was that bad. I will be putting it onto A tier. I really enjoyed it as a finale, a final farewell to Norman Bates, and especially Anthony Perkins, and was actually satisfied Norman finally got his happy ending. I know there was a lot of trauma, a lot of trial and tribulations, but Norman definitely deserved happiness, and it is so satisfying seeing him overcome his trauma, standing up to his abusive mom, finally burning away his past, and Norman gains a family, vowing to become a much better person, becoming a model citizen. They don't actually tease a future sequel, which also is points in its favor. Yeah, no more opening the door, leaving something unresolved for a future sequel. This is a total finale because Anthony Perkins was done after this one. Psycho 4, the beginning, is honestly pretty underrated. Yeah, it could use some improvements and tweaking here and there. A lot of the effects look really cheesy and goofy in this one. You could tell the budget was kind of slashed in half after Psycho 3. Not bad, but also kind of looks like something you'd see on TV. It was originally a TV movie, I heard. But yeah, it's actually pretty underrated. Has a lot of interesting moments, a lot of cool prequel moments, a lot of teases to Norman's origin, a lot of love letters to everything great about the franchise, and a very satisfying finale in my eyes. Psycho 4 the beginning is honestly a pretty good one. It is an A material film. Yeah, Psycho 4, honestly did not hate it. I think it's overhated. I don't get what the fans despise about it, especially because it is a much better finale compared to what Bates Motel did, but we'll get to that soon. But yeah, Psycho 4, underrated, going on to A tier. Alright, next, before we get to the god-awful remake, we do have one other film, Bates Motel, the movie, which is also going on to D tier. This one was pretty bad. Okay, so some of you might not know this film even exists. Bates Motel is a made-for-TV film slash spin-off setting up a new show taking place at the Bates Motel. Yeah, Norman is not even in this show. Norman Bates cameos, but the real main characters are Bud Cort and Lori Petty. Yeah, it is bizarre. So, we're not actually following Norman Bates. We're following Norman Bates' cellmate. Bud Cort plays Norman Bates' roommate from the asylum, and Norman Bates apparently died in prison, but he passed on the hotel to his buddy, his cellmate Bud Cort. Bud Cort inherits the Bates Motel and wants to reopen it into a luxury hotel. However, some spooky shenanigans soon occur. Yeah, it is very, very baffling that this even exists. Bud Cort is this socially awkward dork, a recovering mental patient who inherits the Bates Motel. He moves into it, converts it into his own house, and Lori Petty plays like this bad girl love interest who has been squatting at the motel since it was abandoned. Lori Petty plays like this Chloe Price looking chick, this punk girl with attitude who, of course, slowly but surely falls in love with Bud Cort because he's so charming. Yeah, Toyman and Livewire in this movie, they want to reopen Bates Motel and start a legitimate business together. However, there's a catch. The Bates Motel is haunted. Yeah, I am very dead serious. The Bates Motel is quote-unquote haunted by the ghost of Mother Bates. Some weird spooky things happen, and then the show kind of takes a massive detour into a weird subplot. Okay, so they successfully rebuild the hotel and have their first customer where, out of the completely random, we follow this random teacher who's suicidal, who came to the Bates Motel to basically end her life. She wants to kill herself. However, she meets with ghosts who talk her out of committing suicide. They talk her down, convince her that life is worth living, and the kids are actually ghosts. They reveal that they were also suicidal teenagers who threw their life away and teach her this weird lesson that, oh, life is worth living. You still have so much to look forward to. Why end it now? There's always hope. Really nice stuff, but man, does this feel so out of place in this saga. I'm not kidding, this actually happens. She undergoes this Silent Hill adventure where she learns to value her life and leaves the Bates Motel completely happy and now ready to basically start life anew with a new happy, sunny attitude. And we find out the ghost of Norma Bates was actually this corrupt real estate agent. Yeah, there's a Scooby-Doo mystery in the other half of this film where they keep seeing Mother Bates haunting people, scaring people, and it was the corrupt real estate agent all along. They trap him, expose him, and they save the motel, and basically the ending is a big spin-off sequel bait where, I kid you not, they were going to make a TV show where people would go to the Bates Motel and undergo magical Silent Hill adventures that would either change their lives or give them some dark karmic twist ending. That was actually what this film was trying to set up, folks. It is so bizarre. I am shocked this even got made. The Bates Motel was going to be a Halloween version of Fantasy Island. That's the best terminology I can use to describe it. A lot of people seem to forget that Psycho had sequels. Yeah, they did. They did. A lot of the sequels are pretty good, actually. Psycho 2 is up here in S tier. Psycho 3 and 4 are A tier. They were good. Could have used some improvements, but I do like them. Bates Motel, the movie, it's bad. You can find it free on YouTube because no studio wants to claim it because it was that bad. It was confusing, baffling, weird, and has nothing to do with the rest of this saga. It is a forgotten footnote, and for good reason. Yet nobody wants to see a spin-off that takes place at the Bates Motel but has nothing to do with the Bates family. Yeah, they should have made their own original show. It's a dud, going on to D tier. This is a spin-off to a franchise about mental health. Yes, it is. It was gonna be kind of like a Silent Hill type of show where mentally unwell people would show up at the Bates Motel, undergo some ghostly Silent Hill journey here, where they would either learn a lesson, see the error of their ways, become good people, or get killed by their own karma, you know, like Tales from the Crypt or Goosebumps. Yeah, you can actually find it free on YouTube if you're morbidly curious, but I do not recommend it. It is very out there, bizarre, and ultra boring too. Bud Cort and Lori Petty have no chemistry together, and I was kind of surprised they ended up becoming a couple. Yeah, the bad girl hooks up with the mentally unwell teen loser. That is so bizarre. But yeah, this one, it's a dud. Don't recommend it. D tier. Speaking of bad, let's get our most god-awful entry out of the way. Psycho, the remake, which, shocker, going on to F tier. Are any of you surprised? No, really, is this really a shock to anyone? A horror movie remake ended up sucking. This is Gus Van Sant's Psycho, and honestly, I can save myself some time because it is the exact same movie as movie 1. It is a total shot-for-shot remake of the first film with no changes whatsoever. Oh, there's only 2 changes. It's in color and has worse actors. Yeah, the cast of this movie was very terrible. I think William H. Macy as the detective was the only good one because he actually plays the detective with a different persona. It's pretty much the exact same film, but it's in color and in modern day. And I use modern day very loosely because Gus Van Sant did not upgrade the dialogue. Everyone still talks and acts like it's the 50s, which was the date the first movie was filmed in. And yeah, it is very laughable. People still use old terminology and slang words from back when Hitchcock made the film. Gus Van Sant did not upgrade any of the dialogue from the original film, which makes it a lot more awkward looking at this in modern day. But pretty much the death nail in this movie's coffin is this casting. Norman Bates, played by Vince Vaughn. No, I'm not joking. Vince Vaughn is Norman Bates, and this is one of the most god-awful, hated castings of any film. People hate Vince Vaughn as Norman Bates like Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor or Mila Kunis as the Wicked Witch of the West. It was baffling this even existed. Some people still think this had to be a parody movie. No, it wasn't. This was back in Vince Vaughn's early career, where he did not know what his film niche was. Vaughn was experimenting with a lot of different genres. He was like on Law and Order, The Cell, and The Lost World, Jurassic Park, honestly not playing a lot of comedic roles until much later, and this was one of his poor experiments. Vince Vaughn wanted to play Norman Bates, and to Vaughn's credit, he does look like how Norman was in the book, because Vaughn is also kind of overweight, really disheveled, really creepy and gross looking like how Norman was. Unfortunately, that did not save the film. It pretty much copies everything about the first movie but makes it worse. If you don't believe me how bad this movie was, watch the shower scene, how it's done in both the original versus the remake. The remake, it looks so much worse. Mother is like often like wearing blackface to hide her identity, and it looks very weird. Vince Vaughn dressing like a woman is also the most hilarious thing you'll ever see. He does not look as scary as Anthony Perkins does. I don't know why, but Vince Vaughn cannot do scary faces very well. He always looks like looks like he's like winking at the end of The Wedding Crashers like he usually does. He is not at all who I would describe as an intimidating monster killer. By the way, there's an episode of Be Cool Scooby-Doo that parodies Psycho. Oh, I gotta see that one. Yeah, and Anne Heche as Marion Crane also is equally as bad. Remember how Marion Crane was this super sexy femme fatale girl in the first movie? Well, who do we get to play her? Bony-ass, short-haired lesbian Anne Heche. And Anne Heche is not an attractive woman. She's supposed to be the woman who tempts Norman and reawakens the evil mother side. She looks like a woman you see just at the grocery store. She's very disheveled, very bony, and honestly looks more masculine than Vince Vaughn does. Anne Heche always has this really angry bitch face on her, which really looks off-putting, and we're supposed to find her attractive when she does the shower scene. There's also some very weird art house moments. The Bates mansion does not look intimidating. It looks like a regular house you'd see on a suburb. And whenever somebody dies in this movie, Gus Van Sant splices these weird artsy moments, like there's a sheep in the road and a close-up of somebody's eye and the clouds are moving fast and a crucifixion scene. Yeah, it is weird. Gus Van Sant pretty much lost his mind making this movie, and he has not had a good comeback. Gus Van Sant wanted to reintroduce Psycho to a modern audience. He wanted people of younger generations to appreciate the classic. And it was a noble intent, Gus, but this was not the way. I think you could have saved more time and money re-releasing movie 1 in theaters. Yeah, this one pretty much gets everything wrong about the first film. There's less suspense, too many bright colors, a lot of trippy shots. The scares do not have as heavy an impact as they did in the original. The casting was horrible. William H. Macy is the only actor who really tries in this film, and the dialogue needed a huge update. Though, special mention going to the scene where they also kind of ruin Mother's reveal, where, you know that scary scene where they go in the creepy basement and see Mother was dead all along? Well, you know how we ruin that? Put her into a weird underground bird cage and have CGI spiders crawling on her. The CGI spiders have not held up well, and it's honestly kind of ridiculous that the final fight is taking place in an underground bird cage. Yet Norman has a birdcage zoo underneath his basement and puts Mother like smack in the middle of it. She's like the queen of the birdcage, and yeah, it looks ridiculous. They find her, see CGI spiders all over her. Vince Vaughn steps out wearing his stupidest cross-dressed outfit and basically gets beat up by the woman. Norman Bates loses to Lila Crane rather than Sam Loomis, and it was much more embarrassing. Vince Vaughn is hilariously kicked in the face. Yeah, they take him down and reenact everything from the first movie, ruining the scary shot by having Vince Vaughn smile at the camera looking like a comedy. Have you watched the TV show Spin-Off? The Bates Motel one, I have it on DVD. It came packed with the other sequels. Did not like it. The first Bates Motel is on here on D tier. Anyways, shocker, Psycho the remake, easily the worst one. It sucks. Easy skip. Just watch the first movie. It gets everything wrong about the classic. Not worth your time. And Vince Vaughn as Norman Bates is worse than sin. Oh no, the original 80s show. I saw the Bates Motel movie. This one was set in the 80s. I think that's what you're thinking about or what you're referring to. If not, then I probably haven't seen it. If you're talking about the one with Bud Cort and Lori Petty, yeah, we went over that and I found it really weird. It's going on D tier. Sorry, I drank my water fast. Alright, let's end this with the high note of all high notes, Bates Motel, which is going on to A tier. Yeah, I know, some people will be really upset that I find Psycho 4 better, but what can I say? I thought Psycho 4 had a better finale. Bates Motel is a prequel show set before the original Psycho. The original 80s show is lost media, but you can find clips of it. I know the 80s movie is on YouTube. I haven't seen the show itself. Honestly, I didn't think it got a show because the pilot movie was so bad. Yeah, sorry folks. I almost choked on my water. Okay. Bates Motel, starring Freddie Highmore and Vera Farmiga, is actually pretty good. I really like this show up until the final season. Yeah, if you're curious why it's not S tier, Season 5 was not my cup of cream. I think the final season kind of blew it in the end, which is sad because the first 4 seasons were really, really good. Thanks to some inspiration from The Hannibal Show, they decided to give Norman Bates the Hannibal treatment, where we have a prequel set before the original film of Norman and Norma moving into the Bates Motel to start their family business, opening up a motel near the highway, and finally living a quiet, peaceful life up in the small, quiet mountain town. Vera Farmiga honestly is pretty good as Norma Bates. I kind of do like Olivia Hussey a bit more because she had a more fulfilling character arc, but Vera Farmiga honestly does fine. In here, Norma Bates is actually a lot more sympathetic. Norman's mom is painted as a mother who's trying but failing as a parent. Norma wants to start her life anew, wants to get a good, happy life for her and her son. They want to have a clean slate through the Bates Motel. Norman, once again, is seriously unwell, but they try to flip the script here where Norman is the toxic family member, while Norma is trying to be good but ultimately failing because she's not very smart, she's not very strategic, she is not a good mother. Norman was kind of an unplanned pregnancy. Norma has lived a very tragic life. She was also abused by her family. Her brother Caleb raped her, and she had a second son, Dylan. Dylan is pretty awesome. I do like Dylan. He's not on the poster here. Dylan is kind of the opposite of Norman. He is the bad boy of the family. He's becoming kind of a drug dealer working with cartels, but undergoes this very nice and profound redemption arc. Dylan went from the worst character of the show to one of the best ones. Dylan is pretty much a criminal. We find out this small, quiet mountain town has a dark secret. There's a lot of drug dealers, a lot of mafiosos, and a lot of gang violence going on underground here. Alright, read that one. There's a lot of illegal criminal activity going on here, basically setting up some interesting tension and unique plot threads that will carry on throughout the show. We meet a lot of cool, colorful characters, some complex, some surprise twist villains, some very entertaining characters, and many allies or enemies towards the Bates family. We have Dylan, who's a new character in the Bates family, did really like Dylan. He was cool. He grew better, became one of the best characters of the show. Emma, who works as the Bates Motel receptionist. She works the front desk, helps people check in. Emma has an illness where she has trouble breathing, has very severe asthma, wears like a breathing tube in her nose, is kind of a love interest between Dylan and Norman. We have Caleb, Norma's questionable brother. He also kind of undergoes a redemption arc. Sheriff Romero, who was one of my favorite characters up until the final season screwed him over. And one of my favorite characters, Chick, the creepy homeless guy, played by Beta himself, Ryan Hurst. Yeah, Ryan Hurst is in this show. He plays like this weird old homeless guy who becomes best friends with Norman and his partner in crime come the final season. A lot of interesting mysteries, a lot of intense drama, plot threads, and setting up Norman's villain origin. This is very much a villain rises story arc. We see Norman going from the good son to having a lot of his mental illnesses come to light, to having fallouts with his family, his friends, until ultimately he becomes the villain. Meanwhile, Norma is trying to be a good parent. She ends up wrapped up in a lot of crazy mysteries happening on this show, a lot of creepy villains, creepy characters, some homages to past characters from the saga. Pretty interesting and intense stuff. Season 1 focuses on like a human trafficking arc where Norma's love interest turns out to be a bad guy, and Sheriff Romero, who is a dick at first, turns out to be a good guy. They confront like the head mafioso in this town. Dylan falls in with a bad crowd, becomes a gangster. Norman falls in love with a girl. He is caught in a love triangle with Emma and Bradley. Bradley is the most popular pretty girl in school, played by one of the Zoe 101 actresses, I believe. Bradley, not one of my favorite characters, especially because the show did not know what they wanted to do with her. Bradley was sometimes important, then she disappeared in season 2, then she came back in season 3 only to die. Yeah, they were kind of a mess with this character. They want to turn like Bradley into Abigail from Hannibal. They spoil like a human trafficking ring. Everyone finds a new place in this basically small quiet mountain town. Norman ends up killing his teacher. The teacher is like the sexy MILF teacher at their school. She likes to sleep with her students, tries to seduce Norman, and Norman ends up having a psychotic episode killing her, leading to a lot of drama come season 2. Season 2, it turns out the teacher was actually the daughter of a notorious drug kingpin, Nick Ford. Nick Ford returns to town and is trying to reclaim his position as the head mafioso here, gets into a gang war with Dylan's gang, leading to a lot of interesting gangland drama. Season 2 is pretty awesome, not gonna lie. Kathleen Robertson, the hot chick from Scary Movie 2, comes in. She's kind of Dylan's love interest. Norma is starting to realize that there's something off with her son, and this is a reoccurring element all throughout the show. She thinks Norman might have killed the teacher after they went home together. The teacher like ended up dead that night, and she suspects that Norman might have did it. No, Norman did do it, but he believes that his mom was the killer. He is full-blown psycho. We see Mother fully forms at the end of the second season. Third season, Sheriff Romero and Norma finally fall in love. Norman is kind of losing it here. Bradley comes back to town. Bradley offers to run away with Norman. They could have a clean slate together. Bradley is super pissed that her family kind of moved on without her. Yeah, it is so messed up, but yeah, Bradley's family pretty much forgot about her, pretty much moved on, and Dad remarried someone else to start a new family. Bradley rightfully freaks out. She wants to run away with Norman. Norman has another psychotic episode, and Mother fully reveals herself, where Mother really violently murders Bradley. It's the first time Norman knowingly sees Mother doing all this, and Norman becomes an accomplice to Mother. There's kind of two mothers in this show. There's Norma Bates, the real-life person trying to be a good parent, and there's Mother, the split personality, who's an evil version of Norma. I just want to say the main character had too much plot armor. Absolutely. There's so many times where Norman and Dylan could have died in the show but didn't. Dylan, I believe he does become a badass come season 3, but he was like shot multiple times too and survived. Norman himself, yeah, he's almost killed, almost shot many times. At one point, the mafiosos take him and put him in a box in the middle of nowhere, leave him for dead, and he still manages to survive all this. It is pretty crazy how much he survives. Season 3 might be my favorite one because Dylan ultimately fulfills his redemption arc. Dylan works with Chick. Chick is a gun runner arms dealer who offers Dylan some money he can give for his best friend Emma's operation if he does him a small favor. And Dylan and Caleb work together. He finds out Caleb is his dad. They try to become a father and son duo here. They do the gun job, end up fighting a bunch of cartel guys. They beat up Chick for betraying them. Pretty intense gangland stuff. But Emma's story arc is she basically overcomes her asthma, and not gonna lie, I did not really care about Emma. Emma is my least favorite character of the show. I just found her so boring, and they drag out her illness arc for the longest time. Emma could have been very interesting if she confronted Norman. I was hoping they would reveal a twist that she was kind of the Mary Loomis or Maureen Coyle of the show, but no, she really doesn't do all that much and gets like one farewell episode in the final season, which I thought was the worst episode. But yeah, Emma basically has an entire storyline throughout the show where she's trying to overcome her severe lethal asthma, almost dies, gets the surgery money from Dylan, and she falls in love with Dylan, where Dylan has a redemption arc. He realizes he loves Emma and wants to go straight. Hey man, hey James Loveland, do you think the show went on too long? Yeah, I kinda do. I think it should have ended at season 4, especially because season 4 is all about Norman's villain origin. Norman is taken to the mental institution finally because mom is worried about him, wants him to be treated, and all it does is encourage Norman's villain arc go faster. Season 4, Norman is ultimately the main villain of it. A lot of stuff is happening here outside of the institution. Characters are leaving. Characters are suffering a lot of setbacks, a lot of drama. Sheriff Romero and Norma Bates get married, and it leads to Norman trying to kill them. And in a shocking twist, Norman tries to poison Norma and her lover in bed together, but it was actually Norman trying to commit murder-suicide. He tries to kill them with carbon monoxide poisoning, and unfortunately, Norman survives. Sheriff Romero breaks in, smells the gas, tries to save them, but Norma dies in the end of season 4. She was killed, poisoned by carbon monoxide by her own son. Norman survives, and he completely snaps here, where he hallucinates Mother is back, but really it's the split personality, encouraging Norman to embrace his evil side, and Season 4 would have been the perfect ending for this saga. Everyone's out of the picture. Dylan and Emma have moved away. They became a couple. Emma's expecting a child. Caleb made peace with his son. He also moved away. Chick actually formed a nice, cute, odd friendship with Norman and Norma. Chick is like this secret keeper helping Norman, and Sheriff Romero becomes Norman's archenemy, ultimately gets arrested because his past came back to haunt him. He was exposed for being a part of the mob, and he's taken away to prison, which honestly does feel like he kind of deserved it because his past did catch up with him and he did do a lot of bad things. But yeah, Romero is removed out of the picture, where Norman reopens the Bates Motel, now keeping his mom's corpse in a freezer. Yeah, I did show like clips of this in old reviews. Norma Bates is actually cryogenically preserved in this show. It's kind of weird, but I get the show wanted to do something unique. Psycho remake sucks. Yeah, it's here in F tier. Sorry I'm late, I'm here though. At least the remake is where it deserves to be F. Yep, it's on F. Bates Motel, the movie, is on D tier. Psycho 1 and 2 are S tier. Got Hitchcock's Classic and the second one, they're both S tier. 3, 4, and officially Bates Motel are all here on A tier. Good, not great. Unfortunately, this is where my problems came in. Someone's at the door. Hang on, gotta take care of some stuff. Alright, we're back. Sorry, folks, had a package to take care of. The link I sent you was the Psycho Lost Media. I didn't know how to send it to you. I could just like put it in the chat. Usually I just check it in the comments section. Yeah, sorry I was gone. Had someone at the door. It's okay now. I'm back. Alright, so where was I? Oh yeah. Bates Motel, the final season sucks. I did not like the final season. It rushed a lot. It gave too much focus on the wrong characters and ultimately had one of the most disappointing finales I've ever seen. So, for the first chunk of the final season, they focus on Caleb. Caleb, a character who has barely been present since season 3. Caleb is not at all who I would call a sympathetic character. He's a douche, he's a criminal, and ultimately he is just kicked out of his son Dylan and Emma's lives. Yeah, Emma, kind of in a completely bitch mood, tells Caleb to get lost. She doesn't want her child hanging around somebody like him, and Dylan pretty much forces Dad to leave and hit the road. Caleb returns to the Bates Motel, finds out that Norma's dead, and blames Norman for it. Caleb has like this unhinged hatred towards Norman, and tries to kill him, ends up jumped by him, held hostage, and kind of like reflects on his life and how he got here, and I don't care. Like, you do not care. You look me dead in the eye and tell me Caleb was your favorite character. The guy raped his sister and is a deadbeat criminal scum. He is not at all what I would call a fan favorite. Caleb ends up escaping only to get accidentally ran over by Chick. Yeah, it is kind of hilarious how he goes out. Chick, like, runs him over. He becomes Norman's partner in crime. They hide the body. Then we get an episode focusing on friggin' Emma. Emma comes back into town and basically confronts Norman and her past and realizes that the Norman she loved is gone, and she has like a funeral for her mother, and I completely forgot her mother was even killed by Norman. The mom did that little and meant so little to me. Yeah, sorry I was gone, James. I'm back now, but yeah, Emma has an episode where she gets a farewell, and I don't care. Emma is not an interesting character. I thought she was the weakest of the main cast. Ultimately, this leads to a final confrontation between the two brothers. This is what we're building up to. Norman versus Dylan. Norman is arrested, then he gets out of prison, then he opens up the Bates Motel. We copy the first movie. They're trying to do the Hannibal thing, where Hannibal adapted Red Dragon in the end. Here we're adapting the Psycho 1 in the end. Rihanna as Marion Crane, god-awful casting. I would argue just as bad as Vince Vaughn as Norman Bates. Yeah, Rihanna plays Marion Crane. They made Marion Crane a black woman, which wouldn't be a problem if Rihanna was actually a good actress. Rihanna really sucks in this role. They brought in a friggin' Spencer Monroe from The Walking Dead to play Sam Loomis, and I swear, somebody on the show despised Sam Loomis because he is the worst character. Sam Loomis is a douchebag. He's cheating on his wife with Marion Crane. He's a deadbeat. He's scum. He's a bitch in sheep's clothing. Plays nice with Norman, but then threatens him if he ever tells him that he's cheating on his wife because he went to the Bates Motel. Rather stupidly, he breaks into the Bates Motel and squats there, expecting no consequences from any of this. He's the one in the shower scene. They decided they were not going to kill Marion Crane in the shower. It's Sam Loomis. Norman stabs a guy to death, which probably would have been impactful if this character wasn't so unlikable. You see, it wasn't victimizing a woman, it was Norman killing a character we actually grew to like. Sam Loomis is the opposite. In this show, he is a jerk, he is despicable, and it feels more like he got his comeuppance being killed in the shower, which kinda ruined it for me. But yeah, they copy movie 1 until the last episode. So Sam Loomis's wife is set up like she's gonna be Lila Loomis, or Lila Crane, if you will. Like she's gonna be one to crack the code, but no, she is completely pointless. She is a completely wasted side character who did nothing, and ultimately just leaves the plot at pure random. and Dylan returns back to town to confront his brother. Dylan fights Norman. Norman lets like a family in the Bates Motel. Dylan tells him to get away because his brother is a crazy man, and it leads to the two of them fighting. He confronts Norman, calls him out, and this is what the show's been building up towards: a battle between two brothers. Norman was once the good, beloved son, now he's fallen and become the villain, while Dylan was once the disgrace of the family. He was the bad son, he was the troublemaker, and he's become the good guy hero in the end. The two confront each other, and ultimately, it ends with Dylan killing him. Dylan kills his brother Norman because he's afraid of what the police will do to him. He's afraid that Norman will suffer in prison, kind of an Of Mice and Men ending. And it ends on this bizarre happy note where the Bates Motel is being rebuilt and is now much more positive. We see the sex slave girl got a job as a real estate agent. We see Dylan's happy with his family, talking about his family positively. After Norma and Norman died, he is giving them a more hopeful praise after their death. Show they didn't die monsters. Yeah, I didn't really care for it. The finale sucked. I did not like it. The final season of Bates Motel honestly is a pretty huge missed opportunity. It tries so hard to be this deep, emotional, tragic ending that Norman and Norma just wanted happiness but ended up dying for it because life is just so hopeless and cruel, yet Dylan still comes out with a happy ending. Didn't feel for it. It just did not fit. It felt rushed. It felt emotionless. It felt like they kind of demonized every male character here, tried to make Mother this greater scope villain, then she just awkwardly exits the plot. There is no satisfying ending to Mother's defeat at all. After Sheriff Romero dies, also anticlimactically, Mother just nopes out of the story entirely, and it feels like she got away with everything pretty much. And I did not like this ending. Psycho 4, the beginning, did it better. As cheesy as it was, I did prefer Norman overcoming his mental trauma, finally gaining his well-deserved happiness, finally getting the worth he deserves. Norman actually overcame his psychosis, whereas this Norman did not. They treat him like a freak, treat him like he's too far gone, treat him like they can't just help him overcome his mental illness when it was working earlier in the show. It just rubbed me the wrong way. Did not care for it. Bates Motel, the show, started out good, but ended up going on too long. It was another series that wore out its welcome, I'll put it that way. 4 good seasons, and then a bad final season, which is why it's going on to A tier. But as you can see, we did it! We ranked the entire Psycho Saga. Again, if you want to see my thoughts better worded and with actual clips, go check out my actual ranking video on the Psycho Saga. I wanted to show you the tier list to make things a bit more clear if you didn't get me. So we'll go over it one last time for any of you late birds, or for those of you who skip click all the way to the end. Rock bottom bad, shocker. Psycho the remake, god awful, do not watch it. Vince Vaughn is Norman Bates, it is a sin against nature. D tier, easily the Bates Motel TV movie, did not like it. It was a confused mess and honestly does not belong in the saga. I can see why people want to forget its existence. None in B or C tier, surprisingly, because there were a lot more good movies in this saga. Psycho 3, The Bates Motel Show, and Psycho 4, The Beginning, all awesome. I do like them, flaws and all. Definitely good, serviceable Psycho stories. Really dive deep into the Norman Bates character, make you sympathize with him, and are pretty unique stories to this guy. But in S tier, we have 2, Psycho 2, underrated sequel, highly recommend, it is epic. But number 1, of course, is the Alfred Hitchcock masterpiece, Psycho 1. Was there really any doubt? This is like one of the greatest films of all time, not just of horror, but of cinema in general. Psycho 1 is great. It is one of the best movies ever made, my favorite Hitchcock movie, and pretty much the film that put Norman Bates on the map. Not to mention all those iconic scenes, especially the shower scene. Easily S tier, Psycho 1 is a classic, and its Pretender remake is F tier. So got that, folks? Pretty short tier list today, I know. Okay, so before I wrap up, for those of you who stayed, here's some teases. I do have a new Goosebumps video out on Patreon. Go check that out. I made another top 10 list. I am working on a Tales from the Dark Side review next. I really want to dive back into the dark side, and I think I chose a really fun one to explore. Wolf is also working on some top secret project. We'll see what it is. I don't think it's a Goosebumps one this time, so don't worry if you don't like those. But yeah, for me, I'm gonna do Tales from the Dark Side next. That's what my heart is set on. For next tier list, not sure. I might do another Power Rangers one, might do an updated Final Destination or Scream one, might even do a Scooby-Doo one. Anything's possible. I know some people really want me to do the Poison Ivy one. That one feels appropriate for March. I just gotta watch a few more DC stories. Hope you enjoy that video I sent you. Thank you, Tails. Who gets the dull machete? Who gets the golden machete? Okay. Golden machete for best kill will easily go to Marion Crane from Psycho 1. The shower scene is iconic. That is one of the greatest kills ever. Dull machete for lamest kill will easily go to any of the remake kills. I would say Detective Arbogast's death. As bad as Anne Heche's shower scene was, Detective Arbogast's death was also much weirder in the remake. That'll be the lamest kill because there's a lot of trippy art house scenes spliced in between his bleeding out. That one, F tier, dull machete. We'll see what James A. Janice says about these if he ever gets to the kill count on Psycho. He did Hannibal Lecter before Norman Bates. I'm disappointed, James. Okay, yeah. Next tier list could honestly be anything. Might do Power Rangers, might do a Scooby one, might do another horror franchise updating for Ghostface or whoever. We'll see what the heart wants, okay? But for now, I'm gonna be working on an actual video coming up soon. Hope you guys check that out. But thank you all for joining us. I'm glad you enjoyed these tier lists. I enjoy them too. Hopefully you guys got to see my thoughts better elaborated on in here compared to the video. If not, then go check out my actual ranking. But for now, let's wrap this up. It's almost March. Why not the Leprechaun movies? Yeah, might have to. How many Psycho movies are there? Technically, there are 6. Psycho 1, 2, 3, 4, the remake, and the Bates Motel film. Yeah, that is 6. There's 6 films, 1 TV show. That's all the Psycho media. Somebody said the Bates Motel spinoff did get a few episodes, but haven't seen them. But yeah, 6 movies, 1 TV show. That's all you get. I want the Scream movies. Don't waste your money on the new Scream movie. I heard it was bad. I saw that vote poll I posted. That kind of surprises me. They brought Sydney back, but apparently it was a bad film. But alright, don't worry guys, I'm going to wrap this up and set you guys free. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you all next time. Remember to like, comment, share, or subscribe, or just tune in for more videos posted here on Wolf Entertainment. I'm your host, Catastrophe, and I'll see you all next time. In the meantime, try to enjoy the daylight.